Welcome to the Zeducation Podcast, where it's all about helping people and organizations unleash their greatness. The Zeducation Podcast features lively discussions.
When they share it, you see that they're beginning to feel empowered.
My heart, it's full of pride for me to be at Maitai Samoa.
You don't necessarily need a degree these days. There's so many pathways to success.
Welcome to the Zeducation Podcast. Welcome to the Zeducation Podcast, where it's all about helping you unleash your greatness, both personally and professionally. Today, we're tackling an exciting topic: how local businesses can go global, especially in the Pacific, especially with a Pasifika lens. Our guest today is Āfioga Salā-matua Kome Lauano, who is the CEO and the founder of Āfioga Group, a leader in helping small businesses, especially local farmers, expand their reach into international markets. With the right support, even the smallest ventures can break into the global stage, and Salā-matua is here to share with us how he's done it. So if you ever thought about growing your business across the moana or tapping into new markets, then stay tuned. Look, thank you for driving all the way out here to Pukekohe just to be on this podcast and be here for our listeners. But let's start at the beginning in terms of your story. And for those who don't know you and about your business, also maybe share a little bit about your business and how you arrived there.
Just a little bit about myself first. I was born in Samoa, so I'm not a New Zealand-born Samoan. I was raised in Utah, grew up in Utah, in America. From there, moved back to Samoa in late 80s, 90s. Got a rugby scholarship and then academic scholarship to come to New Zealand. It was a rugby one, got to Christchurch, and it was a league school. So that's when I was shown how to play league, and they said just run it straight. Was able to represent Canterbury in under 14s league as well as basketball, which is what I love. And back then I was 20 kilos lighter, so you could move around. Then moved up to Wellington. Then early 2000s I moved back to Samoa. I was in the airline industry, and after that moved over here when the airline went under and came to New Zealand and started my career in the aviation sector, ground handling with Menzies Aviation, did a few commercial airlines like Cathay Pacific, Emirates. From there on, then I was introduced into New Zealand Customs. And I applied to New Zealand Customs on the last day that it was the tender finished, and at 4:59 p.m. The due time was 5 o'clock p.m. And 3 weeks later, got an invitation. And apparently there were 2,000 people that applied for that time. They scaled it down to about 300, and they did a characteristic sort of test. And I was part of a lot of those people that showed up. There were a few PIs as well. From there, they did another characteristic assessment, and we got invited again until we finally got an invitation to an interview. So had a first interview. Obviously, maybe I connected and ticked the boxes correctly. Had a second interview, and the third one was you got the job. So my life at New Zealand Customs changed because I saw a lot of things that we don't see and how we protect the New Zealand borders. Not only that, how we can minimize illegal imports and also be able to self-educate our Pacific Island people on exports and imports. Spent some time at New Zealand Customs, been around from licensing to trade, auditing, assisted with a few other organizations within Customs. After that, I thought, it's time to go and help my people. So the last area I was in, I audited customs brokers and freight forwarders, licensing, and I decided I can do that too. Why not? So from then on, I left New Zealand Customs at the end of the 2011 World Cup that was held here. Got to meet all the rugby players, especially the Tongan team, where they, if you remember back then, they had all the roadblocks on the motorway. The airport company couldn't charge any more customers that came in. The barriers were lifted, so everyone had a free parking that day. But there's a lot of blessings and opportunities through New Zealand Customs, and a lot of it is where I am today. And so I decided to part my ways, become licensed and become certified, and started taking on the Tongan freight forwarders and assisting them, facilitating them, and explaining what's required and how things should be done. And if you see all these frozen manioke containers around in the south, well, I've been able to facilitate them. So from then on, it just grew. So yeah.
Nice. So you're a custom broker,
Correct.
right? So you left New Zealand Customs to become your own broker, start your own company, and now you're helping, especially like the islands, people, to import some of the goods here to New Zealand. For those who don't know what a custom broker is, can you break that down for us so we can understand a little bit?
Customs broker is the person that when you send over, say, an example, 20-foot container of frozen produce. Their family in Samoa, Tonga, or in the Pacific load it in and send it. The broker's job is to make sure that the paperwork that is endorsed in the Pacific must meet the legal import health standard requirements for New Zealand. And that covers MPI, which is the Ministry of Primary Industry, and New Zealand Customs. Then you have the port authorities and so forth. So the broker is the one that does the runaround. While the customer is resting and sleeping, the broker would be liaising with these border agencies and making sure that what's coming and loaded in, as an example, Tonga, is what exactly matches the manifest, the details, and the goods. Now, it's not always easy sailing. There's always a few hiccups, and that is only because of the type of documentation that's not provided. And the broker also makes sure that when these goods arrive, they are released within a time frame that it doesn't cost the customer or the importer more money, unnecessary money, and make sure it complies with the New Zealand MPI and customs regulations. So yeah, that's pretty much what brokers do.
That's cool. And that's awesome to understand that's what they do. So how do you make a living? Obviously, you make a cut from being the middleman?
Correct.
And supporting them, is that right?
Yes. So you are basically the guy in between. And a lot of people say, so you're the middleman. And I like to not see it as a middleman, because when you say middleman to our Pacific Island communities, they're going to say, oh, so if the bill is $2,000, you must be making $1,500, right? But basically why charges are really high is because you're paying for the fuel and surcharges, and you're paying international rates that some of the freight forwarders have to on-bill after. And being the guy in between is more of trying to facilitate and connect. And at the end of the day, they get their goods, they sell their goods, or they use it. You make your little percentage, and that's all that matters. So little by little, step by step, but when you add all the little coins at the end of the week or the end of the month, it looks good.
I love that. So, I mean, for our listeners, that's good to understand, because I didn't know before. It's not as straightforward as people think. You just import things from the islands, and then it's not straightforward like that. So, making sure that you meet the policies and the rules of New Zealand before things are imported. So what are the things that New Zealand care about when you're importing goods here, especially like food and that from the islands, like manioke? What are the things they're looking for?
So, different type of imports. You have a commercial importer and a private importer. So, for example, your family might send you a container, and that's for your family here. Private importer does still pay GST and also still requires to comply with the regulations. Commercial importer, same as well. Just a different perspective of what the boxes need to be ticked on. And with manioke as an example, if it is being exported from the Kingdom of Tonga, they must meet the requirements to export out of Tonga. Also, they must meet Tonga Customs and Tonga Biosecurity, which they endorse and issue a phytocertificate packing declaration that meets New Zealand import health standards. So a lot of these sort of things, and I researched, and with the understanding and knowledge from New Zealand Customs, it helps to work with these border authorities. And a lot of people will ask, hey, I want to bring this in. I ask them, well, what do you know about this product? How are you going to bring it in? What are the requirements? Things like that, instead of just saying, oh, I want to do this. And there's a lot more that is required. It depends on the commodity. Different type of root crop or different type of in seafood. Fine mats is a big one. And tapa. So when they're coming here, there are things like fumigation. There's things like pre-inspection and making sure that it ticks the box on that side of the country before it gets into New Zealand. So then MAF over here would go and just double check, look at the paperwork. 10, 15 years ago was worse. Now everything's electronically done. It's just a matter of another risk assessment when it arrives here. So there's quite a lot involved. And a lot of our Pacific Island people would hesitate when they're told of charges that need to be paid. And they will always have this, oh, but I didn't pay that much last time. And I would explain, well, maybe last time you didn't have a nematode or a bug or a single, some dirt in it, maybe. And that's why you're not being charged for the MPI inspection, because those inspections are costly. And unfortunately, the importer has to pay for it. So yeah, it depends on what your commodity or what you're wanting to bring in. It's as easy as I can say it is, only because I've been doing it for a while. But for a beginner, I would love to explain to them A, B, C, and it doesn't finish at D. It goes all the way at the end.
Oh man, even just sitting here, just listening about it and learning about it for the first time, this is the most stuff I've learned about that kind of work and custom broker, but even just meeting a Pasifika who's in that space. But it sounds like you take out all the headache from importing things here, which is good for our Pasifika people. So tell us about, because a lot of them import not just for themselves, but it's also part of that's how they make money. All right, they might import a huge container in front of their house, and they're selling taro, frozen taros, and manioke out of that container. Tell us about that. Tell us the trend. What are you seeing with our Pasifika people, especially with all these imports?
Well, I'm not an expert on it, but I can only give you my perspective. One of the main reasons our Pacific Island people are importing produce, even salmon, cocoa, food to sell, cost of living in New Zealand. And I don't want to get too much in depth of it. It also is to do with unemployment. There's a lot of factors involved. Some do it as a hobby. Some do it thinking that they can do it because they saw someone else do it or another Pacific Islander do it. And because they thought that they made 10 grand from that container, then they're thinking, I can do the same. But they don't understand the little hurdles that you got to go through. But a lot of our people are importing these things to provide for themselves, but sell. And a bag of manioke at the moment, I think from Tonga, it's about between 70 and 80 bucks. When there's a shortage, it goes sky high. And it doesn't matter. There's a few freight forwarders that consolidate some of these shipments. But yeah, there's different people have different reasons, but that's the main. Even a box of cocoa from Samoa, you're looking at about 100 to 150 cocos, and a person will sell it at maybe $15. Times that by the amount, and then they have to be deducted of the costs and so forth. And any extra income besides the unemployment benefit or a part-time income is better than nothing. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Are you seeing a huge a trend or uptake in this with our people here in New Zealand?
There is a trend, and the trend would be a few families consolidating the produce coming in. So they share the container and they do a profit share. Now, it doesn't always go according to, but the end game is they are trying to find other means to get income, because put it this way, there's so many bills and so many issues that every family goes through. And if they'll go to the loan sharks just like that, and the loan sharks will charge them 25% on the day, our PI community would more worry about getting the funds, sending it to back home for whatever reason it is. Then they're left with this debt for the next 10 years of paying $100 or $200 a week every week, and that's funds deducted from your food on the table. So it's hard out there, but unfortunately, some of our families would choose differently. So I would rather, have an old vehicle that can drive me from A to B, but be able to know that if I go to the store or the shop, I can afford to buy something. And when I shop and I see some families that with their trolleys, they're looking at the products, they're putting it back, but it's a need, necessity, and my heart just cries to them like kalofai. I wish there could be something better for our people, because our people contribute to this economy in New Zealand big time. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it also contributes to the islands as well, because they're exporting things here to New Zealand. They make money from that, which means more money for the economy back in the islands, but it's also good for us as well.
Yes.
So it's actually, people don't realize that what you're doing is actually building the economy, especially if you're doing it like, you one family, but imagine 100 families, and how much that's helping. It sounds like this is a pretty interesting job and career to be in. And it's not many people, even myself, knew that was a thing. You can be a customs broker. I thought, okay, we just let all the big companies deal with that, the freight forward companies and all that. So what's your advice around for people who are thinking about maybe getting into this space and we're like, hey, you know what, maybe I want to consider being a custom broker. What's your advice around that?
For the school leavers?
Anybody that's interested, yeah.
It's more of get into the freight forward industry to sit or do a introductory level for freight forward industry and logistics. Once you are hired in a freight forward company, and as an example, say DHL, for example, you then are the newbie, and that's the time you start learning the ropes and find out, because then from there you will move from admin to imports or exports. You will see that customs brokers work in a very sterile environment, because customs brokers also, there's a thing called a tariff classification. And that tariff basically means when the goods are imported from whatever origin country, the customs broker has to classify. So, for example, your shoes may be made in China, but the soles are made from Japan, and it's then exported into the e-commerce of Australia, and then Australia brands it. So then when it arrives into New Zealand, you got to define what's the origin of this shoe. Is it Australia? Is it Japan? Or is it China? Customs broker have to apply. It's a thick book. It's called the Customs Bible, and you need to know every single classification for every single item. And it's funny when people ask me, hey, so what do you classify plastic rod? I was like, it's under a tariff 3926. It just happens but not that I read it. I'm not a geek. I don't read those things. But yeah, so once they do get into that space, ask questions. And one thing our Pacific Island youngsters or people do is they self-devalue themselves by not pushing themselves to the next level, not elevating and not asking the question. There's no question that's dumb. And even if it might sound dumb, still ask it. That's what I did. I asked around, and when New Zealand Customs, my first job was a senior customs broker, only because of what I had. And when I started as a senior customs broker, everybody looked at me like, oh, yeah. But the funny thing, when I first showed up for my interview, the reception goes to me, are you here for the warehouse job? And I said, oh, nope. I'm actually here for the customs brokerage. It's my first day today. They're like, oh. And I was like, yep. She's looking at the color of the guy, right? And because the guy came in shorts and in a T-shirt, but it's what's the value that we can offer. So our community or our Pacific Island people need to get into another niche market, freight forward industry. And I give my hat off to a lot of the Tongans for popping up freight forwarders, small freight forwarders. Good on them, because if they don't, another nationality will. And they will take control of what's on the other side of the world. But for those who might be watching, for those who are listening or not sure because they hear their parents saying, go study to be a doctor, go study to be an engineer, go study to be a pilot, go study. Some of our kids aren't made in that form, but we need to mold them into something different, something that they want to do. So it doesn't matter what, but the key word of freight forward industry and customs is that people will continue to order online. And as long as people order online,
That's right.
Things will be coming into the country. Look at the warehouse, look at Briscoe's, look at Costco, look at everything didn't just happen in New Zealand. 89.9% are all imported.
Wow.
So, yeah, the industry will always continue. During COVID was an example. People were clicking. People were ordering online. Kept me in a job, kept me, running. But we just need to, I love our young people, and I really hope and pray that they don't see themselves as being limited, because people go, oh, sky's the limit. It's like, sky's not the limit. The stratosphere, you go beyond the sky.
Yeah. So if someone's thinking about exporting, they've got a business here, because the thing that you work with is normally products, it's not services, so many products, tangible things. Someone's thinking about expanding to the islands and shipping some of their products to the islands. What are things that they have to think about and be mindful of before they start thinking about expanding to the islands?
I think they would need to know their product, know what their product is, know what their product and service will be, but also know what the industry is, and research. There's no harm in researching. Find out what your product is going to do in the Pacific, as an example. Find out what your product's going to do that another person isn't doing already. So for example, why sell Nike shoes when it's already sold at Nike? Why order, watches when it's already sold at Pascal's, for example? But you got to find what's the need. And for those who are wanting to start out expanding, find out what the pros and cons are. Find out what shipping rates, airline rates. There's so much involved. People think, oh, I'm going to start sending this. And you got to ask them, how? What are you going to pay? Are you factoring in the cost? Are you factoring this in? Are you looking at the landed costs? Who's going to pay that? Is it you, your buyer, your seller? And does it comply with the local authorities? Does it comply with their border agent? There's so much involved that you can't just have a light bulb and go, I'm going to go do it. Realistically, and I don't want to sugarcoat that, it's black or white.
So basically, you got to go to a custom broker, get some advice before you start.
You can go, but ask someone. Every Pacific Islander has a network. Every Pacific Islander knows somebody. When something happens, your car breaks down, you go, hey, who's the engineers or mechanics in our family? Let's ring them. Those are the kind of people that you need to find out.
I like that. Asking the right questions to help find the right people for the problem. This is an interesting question. I've seen in the news, in the media too, how sometimes people ship will import some dodgy stuff. Uh, how do you make sure that doesn't happen? Or when you're dealing with clients, you don't want to be caught up in all that stuff. How do you protect yourself as a custom broker from that kind of stuff and making good deals with the right people?
Well, we live in a perfect world, right? Everything seems perfect. Unfortunately, there are good and not good people out there in the world. And people will always choose the quick fix, get rich, but sleep with one eye open. And I've been in the industry for a while, and I've even seen raids, seen drug imports. We've intercepted at the airport. I've seen when people are body packing, and so much. But for what? For what worth? As a customs broker, I select my customers, and I rather deal with commercial clients. I will facilitate and help our people who are wanting to find out. But main thing is when somebody asks me, hey, I want a shipment and I'm going to do this, and then first ask, where's it coming from? What is the commodity? What is the volume of the commodity? And then I ask, who is the consignee or the importer? And if it's them, then I'll explain to them the risks. There's always a risk. Now, unfortunately, there's always duplication, there's always concealment, there's always someone out there that's saying, hey, I'm going to squeeze this into your shipment. And 9 times out of 10, you, the importer, you won't know. But you'll know when customs and the police are knocking on your door. So it's I can't prevent that. I can only ask a few risk assessing questions of what's your commodity. And when you get the invoice of the commodity, you double check. I research who the supplier is. I check if they're real. I check the commodity, the type. I check if there's a manufacturing declaration. I check for a certificate of origin. There's quite a lot of things that you have to check. And if they all are kosher to me, then I'll help.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we can't stop things from coming into the country. With border control and customs and MPI and the police, I think they're only stopping maybe 45 to 50%. The rest are still coming through the mail center. They're still coming through containers. Yeah, the people out there that are doing these things are trying every single trick. I mean, even toasters, right? When I was at the mail center, there was a toaster that came through. In my head, I was like, what idiot would buy a toaster online and ship it over when you can buy a $10 toaster at the warehouse? Concealed, x-rayed, examined, physically examined, and there was contact NT, just a precursor for meth. So, there's a lot of these things that come through that, and
That's right.
yeah.
So I'm not sure if this happened to you, but obviously, you make money based on what comes in and what goes out, right? If nothing's moving, then it's hard to make a buck, right? And I think I go back to like COVID and lockdown and all that issue that happened when all the shipments came in and they had to stay out in sea for a couple of days or whatever until they could come in, right? That would have impacted your business. But I assume something like that would ever happen again or rarely happen again with that. But how do you ensure that your business, especially as a custom broker, that you're making money and you're making more money, right? Like, what do you do to help with that? Because I can imagine like you're relying on imports and exports.
Well, I don't only wear one hat. So you got to be creative. And when one streamline is not coming through, you open the other pipeline. And what I mean by that is, so during COVID, also I'm not only just a customs broker, I'm a consultant for the Pacific Islands. And I'm a trade consultant for the government of Vanuatu under the Department of Industry. And I've also done trade consultancy for the government of the Cook Islands, Rarotonga, in shaping their exports, their taro, as well as Vanuatu. And currently I also facilitate trade in Samoa as well. So during COVID, I was online with some of the government ministers in the Cook Islands and how to shape and how to, because they were also not getting income. there was no tourism going into the Cook Islands. So a light bulb came to my head and said, hey, we don't, because I love the Cook Island taro, right? And so when some of my friends, when they come through, they always bring me taro. And so many people were asking questions about the taro, and I said, I can make it happen. So we dealt directly to some of the government ministers and then to the CEO of MAF in the Cook Islands. And I said, now there's no tourism. So, and this is the same time while I was still doing my other job. And I explained, how can we get our growers together? How can we get them together to make some extra income? Now, at the time, I wasn't really thinking of income. I wasn't thinking of making $1. I was thinking bigger beyond that, of create the pathway, educate, aware, and then send it over. I liaised with some of the Cook Island communities here in New Zealand, and I said, let's do a prepayment process. So after speaking to some of the growers, and this is all during, I think we're at level 3 now, just getting out of level 2. And I explained, let's find a way. There's a demand for the Cook Island taro, but no one's bringing it in. I reached out to Air New Zealand, and I said to Air New Zealand, your aircraft is coming empty. And there he goes, what do you mean? I said, and as a load controller, understanding the specs of the aircraft, and I said, well, there's no tourism going. It's only the expat flights, and also there's small freight going. But coming back, it's empty. So I met with some of the New Zealand people and the ones who make decisions, and I got diverted, and I said to New Zealand and the Cook Islands, give me this rate, and I'll give you at least a ton or two to air freight back. The freight rate, I think, was about $8 something. I got it down to $1 a kilo. And I had to, I got to prove it now. So managed to go over to the Cook Islands and took some of the people that I liaised with, gave them an awareness presentation on what's required, and just started with a small group, because the last thing you want is to throw a fishnet out there, then everybody comes and says this and that. And the cooks, there were a few that hesitated, because apparently in the past they were ripped off by their own people. They would send things here, and the guy or whoever was the guy who was selling never sent money back, and it went on for more than 6 months. And even to the time that I was there, they said, to this day, after 2 years, we still haven't got paid. So I had to kind of, oh gosh, and it's a mentality that kind of happens. So I'm thinking, okay, being a Samoan going into the Cook Islands, they're probably going, what's it in for you? So I said, this is what we're going to do. So we coordinated something here in New Zealand. I said, let's prepay, let's pre-order so I can go over to the Cook Islands with money. Because I'm not rich. I don't have that much money. So took the pre-orders, went to Raro, liaised with them, and I managed to amend and change the legislation for the Cook Islands and New Zealand. So I told them, we're going to bring it this way, but it's going to come air freight. And so each grower came with their bag, cash in the hand, and I gave them the cash. I invited the Cook Island TV to come so that it could avoid any questions being speculated of, are they going to get paid? So by the camera there shooting, shows me giving the money to the growers. And it sort of washes my hands from any other noise. So they were happy, they were satisfied, they got money on the spot. And there were 2 female growers. And she came with only 3 bags, but I paid her 5 bags worth, but it's the value that we see in people. So then the taro was exported, arrived here, me as a customs broker. So I registered a company in the Cook Islands as the exporter, and then I was the importer here and the buyer as well at the same time. So keeping it in-house and knowing that I could bring goods over here and clear it. So I was on the same aircraft of the Taro. So we did everything on the Friday, and then Saturday the Taro came. I boarded that flight. By the time I landed, I lodged the clearance and the pending. It got out within 2 days, and the Cook Island community got their Taro. So it was sold out already. Wow. Under 2 days. So it's quality control, as well as understanding when the freight forwarder lies to you, when they say, oh, it's being held by so-and-so, oh, we need this. But because I lodged it and I liaised directly with Air New Zealand, and we have a good relationship at Air New Zealand. So when you know what you know, nobody can con you. Nobody can, just because they're on that side of the counter and have a different skin color to you, doesn't mean they know.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. You know what I love about, there's so many lessons from that story. But I'm sitting here going, wow, this guy is not just a custom broker. This guy's a playmaker. Because what I loved about that is you're basically helping to build the pipeline. You're not just like, wait till someone's ready to ship something. You're like, how can we get these farmers together? How can we get them to be, do business with them? Get them to come here, sell their product, and then you fly here, you fly to this country, and you're educating them on how it works, and and the deals in there. And it's just like you're building an ecosystem around making business work for you as well. And it's so clever that you've got to set up a business in the Cook Islands, exporting here to New Zealand, but at the same time you're the buyer of your own products. So you can kind of control the deal almost, negotiate that.
And it's not like I want to control it.
Yeah.
I need to control it for a lot of reasons, for integrity purposes, for transparency purposes, and for being honest. So we've done that. We did a couple of shipments out of the Cook Islands, and I've left it for them to roll it. And I started it also in Vanuatu, same thing. But this was in frozen produce, and this was just after COVID as well. So I was in Vanuatu last year when they invited me to facilitate a trade mission. And I did a presentation, and all the growers came, different growers, from kava growers, from exporters. And I just said, look, I'm going to mirror the same process I did in the Cook Islands. Long story short, it was accomplished. It came the following month. I steered the New Zealand trade mission here, took them down to visit the RSE scheme, which I'm also a part of, and went down, sold their own produce to their own people. And it was a one trade lane, so I didn't have to go knocking on doors. We had kava come through, sold directly to the Nivans, then Fijians bought, and also with their frozen produce, it was the yellow manioke and the white manioke that came, and that was their first 2 containers exported out of Vanuatu to New Zealand, to Auckland, sorry. And then the Tongan community bought, and it just went. So from then on, then they wanted me to facilitate more, and now I'm on their payroll as well. So
that's awesome. So you're basically a global business, and you do deals and business in the islands, and you also here in New Zealand. So as we're edging closer to the end of our podcast, I have a few more questions before we wrap things up. And obviously, you've got experience doing business in the islands and experience doing business here in New Zealand. What's different? Well, what are you seeing as similar or different in terms of how we do business here in New Zealand versus how they do business in the islands? Because it sounds like you got some experience in different islands there.
There's always teething issues in the islands, and the teething issues is the lack of information from New Zealand to the administrations of those government sectors. And so, for example, Samoa, I was in Samoa a couple of years ago, and they had issues. NPR were about to ban all seafood imports from Samoa because of a few reasons. So I reached out to the government minister, and he said, come and see me, and sat down with their CEO and all their people, and their CEO and them didn't like me because they thought I was coming to, and I said, I'm not here to take anyone's job. It's just going to affect my customers and our people. So 6 days, sat with them, showed them this is what's required, update this, And from then on, we've been good friends with the government ministers and some of these are the decision makers. And in January 2022 or 23, last year, we did our first ever air freight of fresh produce of taro, 2 tons. Now, no one's ever exported 2,000 kilos of fresh taro out of Samoa. Again, with my credibility in the Pacific and in the Cook Islands with Air New Zealand, I reached out to my Air New Zealand friends again. I said, this time you have like a leverage. I said, what's your offer? You can give me a rate. So we can give it to you this. And I said, no, I want it at this. So they gave it to me at what I wanted. I had the support from the Minister of Agriculture, the CEO of Agriculture, even Pacer Plus. I had facilitation assistance from Pacer Plus, Pharma Plus. And it wasn't really I created something new. It was the same thing I was mirroring. If you trust in the process, the money will follow. So from there, we sent the first one, and it was sold directly to some of the local stores. Tassi Market is one of the big customers of mine, and it was sold directly to them, and then we continued. Then the next one happened. But I picked the growers that were RSE workers that have returned back to Samoa. And the reason why I picked the RSE workers is because they've been exposed in New Zealand. They understand how New Zealand operates after, 18 months being here for the pruning and the harvest. So it's a leverage up. And then after that, asked them, who has plantations? A few put their hands up, and then I worked together with them. And this was a transferable skill that I knew that I don't have to teach them. But what they didn't know they had was they already had an advantage because they already were in New Zealand. They've been exposed, they've seen how New Zealand is, and they know that it's a need for our taro. So we did that, and we continue to do that, and I have the support from the local authorities and, just facilitating, helping. Now, people think that export and whatnot is my main business, but no, it's not really that. It's creating a pathway. So that's the thing. Create the pathway, give them the tools, and then you're on your own, but continue to give that wraparound service. I don't get paid for it, but because I know I'm satisfied with my clientele I have at the moment. I'm also in the global IT kind of software thing I do at the moment, and one of the major CTO airlines that I help out. So you don't want to take too much in case you cannot service all of them. And you don't want to be the greedy guy that says yes, 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 and you can only say yes and do two. So I rather have a stable income pipeline and know if this one stops, I can go to this one. If that one stops, then this one.
I love it. I love it. I know you're a Christian, and I know you're Pasifika, and just sitting here listening to you, looking at you, you come across as a very humble person. You're not boastful or anything like that, but at the same time, you're good at what you do. Is the vibe that I get here. Which values, whether it's from your faith or from Pasifika values, do you feel like has really helped you succeed and get you where you are today, especially in business?
I think you have to have a good relationship with your Savior, Jesus Christ. Also being raised up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I've been taught, and at the end of the day, you make your own choices. Also being raised by good parents, family, support system. And then also when you have your own family, you have a good wife that supports you, counsels you, tells you go left or go right, gives you the eyebrow if you're doing it wrong. Yep, that sort of thing. And then my kids ground me. So a lot of this I see that if you have and I'm not saying, I'm trying to preach here, but if you have a good relationship with your Savior, in the Bible gives you all the examples of, and that's why the Savior taught in parables. It's for us to learn. And it's a blessing to be able to do this and be in this kind of space as a Samoan born. Not a New Zealand Samoan born, but a Samoan born that, you hear the stories of we didn't have much, but we had God in our lives. So I hope and pray whoever's watching this can, If they're motivated by doing better, do it. Doesn't matter what it is. And don't wait for people to say, well, when lemons are thrown at you, why wait for someone to throw you a lemon? Go and climb the lemon tree. Grab the lemon. Make a lemonade. But make the best lemonade with brown sugar, cinnamon sticks, and ice cubes, and then drink it. And if it tastes good, share it. That's all it is.
I love that. Love that. And, thank you again for your time and just being generous with your knowledge, your experience, and helping bringing more awareness and also excitement to the kind of work that you do. Because before that, I was like, what do they do? It doesn't seem that, but it's really interesting. But not just that, you're changing lives, which is even bigger in creating pathways. So don't just create a business, but create pathways that help give back to the community. And I really love that. What's your final words of encouragement for our listeners? If there's any highlight you want them to take away from this conversation today, what would that be?
Show the best version of yourself to others. Be kind to others, because you never know that person that you cut off on the road and flip the finger or whatever. You might have a flat tire and they'll be in front of their house. And when you knock on the door and they open the door, they go, oh, you're the guy that. So what goes around comes around. And in Psalm 1, there's a little saying, it's called Ele loalo vai. And that basically means you never know where your footprints or footsteps will take you. Because I might need help from you today, but then I'll definitely help you tomorrow. So whoever's out there thinking of a career change, and just because your parents tell you you need to study this, go with what your heart says. Do something that you love to do. Don't do something that you're good at, but do something that you love to do. And I've been working from home for the last 8 years before COVID, and I'm enjoying it. So there's only one downside of that. So when your wife comes home and she goes, there's no food cooked. But hey, that's another segment, okay?
It's another podcast. Oh, thank you so much. Some great final words of encouragement there. Again, thank you so much for your time. Āfioga Salā-matua. Thank you so much.
Thank you.